In 1969, Japanese electronics giant Seiko unleashed a single, highly engineered quartz wristwatch that instantly demolished the centuries-old monopoly of Swiss mechanical watchmaking, causing over 1,000 legendary Swiss brands to permanently collapse. This calculated disruption, known to historians as the Quartz Crisis, was not an accidental shift in consumer preferences, but a ruthless, deliberate execution of industrial warfare designed to bankrupt Switzerland's luxury heritage. For hundreds of years, Switzerland held an unbreakable, absolute grip on the concept of time itself. Nestled deep within the snowy peaks of the Jura Mountains, entire valleys were populated by generation after generation of reclusive master watchmakers. These artisans spent their lifetimes carving, polishing, and assembling microscopic brass gears, balance wheels, and hairsprings to capture the essence of a passing second. To own a Swiss watch was to own the absolute pinnacle of human engineering, a status symbol of unmatched prestige, wealth, and permanence. But behind this glittering prestige lay a profound, arrogant vulnerability. The Swiss watch guilds genuinely believed that their hand-carved craftsmanship was irreplaceable. They believed that no machine could ever replicate the soul of a mechanical escapement. They were dead wrong. Across the Pacific Ocean, in the high-tech, hyper-efficient laboratories of Tokyo, a quiet, devastating revolution was being plotted. It wasn't a battle fought with better gears, but with a microscopic slice of rock, a tiny electrical battery, and a terrifyingly genius business strategy. This is the secret history of how a single Japanese corporation drove an entire nation's pride to the absolute brink of extinction, and the genius, albeit deceptive, psychological survival plan that resurrected the Swiss watch as the ultimate illusion of the modern world. To understand how close the Swiss came to total annihilation, we have to look at the sheer scale of their dominance before the collapse. In the mid-20th century, Switzerland controlled over 50% of the global watch market, and an astronomical 90% of its profits. Watchmaking was not just an industry, it was the cultural and economic backbone of the Swiss state. The Swiss government actively protected watchmakers, shielding them from competition and fostering cartels that fixed prices and controlled supply. The Swiss believed that watches were inherently mechanical marvels. They measured their success by the Swiss Observatory trials, where elite brands competed to see whose microscopic, hand-adjusted mechanical movements could achieve the highest precision. To the Swiss, timekeeping was an art form, a luxury, and a lifelong investment. But while Swiss watchmakers were obsessively micro-adjusting tiny balance wheels under magnifying glasses, Japanese engineers at Seiko were looking at a completely different technology, quartz. The science of quartz was not entirely new, but applying it to a wristwatch was considered an engineering impossibility. When you apply an electrical current to a tiny, precisely cut piece of quartz crystal, it vibrates at an incredibly high, hyperstable frequency, exactly 32,768 times per second. By using an integrated circuit to count these vibrations, a quartz watch can divide down the frequency to drive a tiny motor that turns the watch hands. The result is a timekeeping device that is infinitely more accurate than the most expensive mechanical Swiss watch ever made. A masterfully crafted mechanical Rolex might lose or gain several seconds a day. A cheap quartz device loses only a few seconds a month. For years, quartz timepieces were the size of refrigerators, used only in scientific laboratories and naval vessels. But Seiko's visionary leaders embarked on a highly classified mission, codenamed Project 59A, with one single, obsessive objective: shrink this refrigerator-sized technology into a device that could fit comfortably on a human wrist. 4. Nearly a decade, Japanese engineers worked in absolute secrecy, overcoming immense hurdles in microbattery life, integrated circuit design, and crystal cultivation. On Christmas Day, 1969, Seiko finally struck their lethal blow. They released the Seiko Quartz Astron. It was the world's first commercial quartz wristwatch. Visually, it looked like a classic gold watch, but internally, it was a terrifying masterpiece of microelectronics. At launch, the Astron was incredibly expensive, costing roughly 450,000 yen, the equivalent of a brand new mid-sized Toyota sedan. But Seiko's masterstroke was not the Astron itself, it was what they did next. Instead of hoarding the patents for their groundbreaking quartz technology, Seiko chose to open source them. This was a calculated, brilliant, and devastating business strategy. Seiko knew that if they kept the technology to themselves, quartz would remain a niche, expensive luxury. But by sharing the basic patents with the world, they invited giant manufacturing hubs in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the United States to mass-produce quartz movements. Within a few short years, the cost of manufacturing a highly accurate quartz watch plummeted from hundreds of dollars to just a few cents. Watches were no longer precious heirlooms, they were cheap, disposable commodities. The market was flooded with hyper-accurate, low-cost digital and analog watches, and the global consumer base quickly realized they no longer needed to pay a fortune for a delicate Swiss mechanical timepiece that required expensive servicing. This triggered what the Swiss still refer to as the Great Swiss Watchmaking Massacre. Between 1970 and 1983, the Swiss watch industry experienced a literal apocalypse. Over 1,000 watch brands completely vanished from the face of the earth. Employment in the Swiss watch sector plummeted from 90,000 highly skilled workers to under 30,000. Historic Swiss villages that had spent centuries whispering to the steady tick of mechanical clocks fell completely silent. The heavy, historic brass machinery of legendary watchmakers was sold off to foreign scrap metal dealers for pennies on the dollar. Swiss banks, terrified of throwing good money after bad, completely cut off credit to the watchmakers, viewing them as ancient, dying dinosaurs in a digital age. Switzerland's pride was entirely shattered. The country was on the verge of losing its economic crown jewel forever. But just as the final nails were being driven into the Swiss watch coffin, an unlikely savior emerged from the corporate shadows. His name was Nicolas Hayek. He was not a watchmaker. He was a Lebanese-Swiss management consultant who specialized in liquidating failing industrial enterprises. The Swiss banks had hired Hayek to perform an autopsy on the country's two largest, bankrupt watch conglomerates, Swatch and SSH, and prepare them to be sold off to Japanese buyers. But as Hayek analyzed the wreckage, he realized something that the traditional Swiss watchmakers had completely missed. The Swiss had been trying to fight Seiko on technology, accuracy, and price, a battle they were destined to lose. Hayek realized that the Swiss needed to completely abandon the logical paradigm of watchmaking and enter the realm of pure human psychology. In 1983, under Hayek's direction, Switzerland launched a counteroffensive that would go down as the greatest brand turnaround in corporate history. They released a product that horrified traditional watchmaking purists, a cheap, brightly colored, mass-produced plastic watch. It was called the Swatch. The Swatch was a psychological masterstroke. Hayek realized that in a world where everyone had a cheap quartz watch, a timepiece was no longer a tool to tell time. It was a fashion statement. It was self-expression. Swatch watches were cheap, fun, and highly collectible. Consumers didn't buy a Swatch to keep forever, they bought 5 or 6 swatches to match their outfits, their moods, or the changing seasons. The Swatch became an overnight global phenomenon, selling millions of units and generating mountain-sized piles of cash. But the Swatch was actually a massive, brilliant Trojan horse. The immense profits generated by the cheap, plastic Swatch watches were secretly and systematically funneled back into buying up, saving, and consolidating the dying historic Swiss luxury brands like Omega, Longines, Blancpain, and Breguet. Once these legendary brands were financially stabilized under one massive corporate umbrella, which eventually became known as the Swatch Group, Hayek executed the final, genius stroke of his psychological trap. He completely rebranded mechanical Swiss watches. He declared that a Swiss mechanical watch was no longer a tool for keeping time. If you wanted to know the time, you could look at a cheap Japanese quartz watch, or a microwave, or a dashboard. Instead, a Swiss mechanical watch was rebranded as a piece of kinetic art, a wearable sculpture, and the ultimate statement of human luxury. The Swiss deliberately leaned into their own obsolescence. They made their watches more expensive, more exclusive, and harder to buy. They convinced the global elite that the very inaccuracy of a mechanical watch, the sweeping second hand, the delicate ticking of spring-loaded gears, was a beautiful, romantic human rebellion against the cold, sterile perfection of the digital microchip. This psychological illusion worked flawlessly. Today, Switzerland once again dominates the global watch industry by value, pulling in billions of dollars in profit every single year, not because they make the most accurate devices, but because they mastered the art of selling the romantic, beautiful illusion of obsolescence. The Quartz Crisis proved that in the ruthless arena of global business, the superior technology rarely wins. The brand that masters human emotion, psychological framing, and cultural storytelling will always reign supreme.